Tonight's session is called Chasing Security. And that's because the last session, if you remember, the teacher led us into one of the most familiar and unsettling realities of life, which is that we are not in control. And I think we all agree on that, even if we don't like it. We have seasons that we don't choose. We live life at a pace that we can't manage on our own, and we get outcomes that we can't always predict. And so if we can't control everything, what does the teacher look at now? Well, he looks at security. Well, what will make me feel safe? Can anybody relate to that concept and that idea about wanting to just feel safe? Well, it's not always in obvious ways that we search this out, but in everyday decisions we see it. People always look for something consistent, something reliable, something that we can hold on to when everything else feels uncertain. And for some people, that security is found in success. For some people, it's found in relationships or money or influence or the sense that they're building a life that can't easily fall apart. But the reality is, we're going to see tonight, is there's really no form of a life that can't easily fall apart under the right circumstances. So we just want to find a life where we finally feel quote unquote safe. And so the 3 chapters of Ecclesiastes that we're going to cover tonight, 4 through 6, they start to uncover how fragile these sources of security really are. And the teacher approaches this topic from many different angles. He's going to cover oppression, loneliness, success, wealth, and even worship. And in each one, he's going to ask the same question in a different way. But Jesus also spoke to this idea. So I just want to share this from Matthew 6:19 through 21. Jesus said this. He said, "Don't store up treasures here on earth where moths eat them and rust destroys them, and where thieves break in and steal. Store your treasures in heaven where moths and rust cannot destroy, and thieves do not break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will be also." And I want to share this with you because just to give you like a little pastoral moment before we fold into teaching mode, this is really important. And a lot of people get it a little backwards and don't realize it. What Jesus says here is wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will be also. A lot of times we think whatever we desire the most is what we treasure. If you decide what is the treasure in your life, what is the highest value, and you make that a consistent determination in your life, the desires of your heart will float there. So you can choose whether or not it's your bank account. You can choose whether or not it is a person. You can choose whether or not it's a life goal. Whatever you choose as being the ultimate value is where the desires of your heart will go. And you can see how this works, how once you belonged to the world, but now you belong to the kingdom of God. And so your allegiance changed, your desires shifted as you decided what was actually more valuable. And it's that way for life. So the one thing I will just tell you before we jump into the first 6 verses is this. The words that Jesus shares that I just read, it's the same problem that the teacher's about to reveal. It is possible to build a life that looks secure on the outside while also placing your trust in things that can actually still fall apart. Several years ago, I went to go visit my Auntie Hope down in Texas, and I was so excited because she makes this shrimp stew. She lives right there on the Gulf. The shrimp is amazing. It's got some kick to it. It's like tomato-based, big potatoes. You didn't come here to hear me talk about the soup, but it's an amazing soup. I'm so excited. And so I'm ready to eat this soup. And so I go over to her table and I sit down, but I sit down all the way to the floor because the chair did not hold up. And I don't know if you've ever had a moment like that where the chair that you go to sit on just breaks or it falls apart. It ain't great. But that's sort of a metaphor for what we're looking for in this session when we're chasing security. We assume when we sit down on a chair, it's going to hold us. Most of us don't come to church and then look at one of these burgundy fellas right here and go, all right, okay, and then brace yourself, right? We just know it's going to hold us. That's kind of what we're looking at. What is it that we assume in life is going to hold us up, and then it really doesn't under the right circumstances? So the first 6 verses, this is what I'm calling the weight of oppression. Your notes will start right here. In Ecclesiastes chapter 4, in the first verse, he says, "Again, I observed all the oppression that takes place under the sun. I saw the tears of the oppressed with no one to comfort them. The oppressors have great power and their victims are helpless. So I concluded that the dead are better off than the living. But the most fortunate of all are those who are not yet born, for they've not seen all the evil that is done under the sun. And then I observed that most people are motivated to success because they envy their neighbors. But this too is meaningless, like chasing the wind. Fools fold their idle hands, leading them to ruin, and yet better to have one handful with quietness than 2 handfuls with hard work and chasing the wind." Well, the teacher opens this section by looking at something that really does unsettle the idea of security, just like that. And he looks at the world and he sees, here's your first blank, oppression. I mean, we can look at the world, we can see oppression right now. You can look at 3 minutes of the news and get a whole story about it. Real people carrying real pain and no one stepping in to comfort them. Sometimes it feels so overwhelming. We see these scenes and we say, why doesn't somebody do something? But we're not doing anything, but we don't know what to do. And we feel like, what can one person do? That's part of why a lot of people don't. But if you look around the world, it doesn't really matter the country or the government that you look at. There are places where power is uneven and justice feels absent, and people that are suffering feel like they're left alone in it. He says, I saw the tears of the oppressed with no one to comfort them. That line stands out to me because the word translated as oppression comes from the Hebrew word ashak, which carries the idea of being wronged or exploited or crushed by someone stronger. By someone stronger. In other words, we're talking about bullies in the system, right? So this is not just an average difficulty. Some things in life are hard. This is the experience of being overpowered in a way that feels impossible to escape. And what makes that even more painful is he's not just watching something stronger crush or oppress them, there's a lack of comfort in it. And the teacher repeats this. He says there's no one to comfort them. That Hebrew word there, nacham, is best described as relief, compassion, or someone stepping in. Someone stepping in to ease the pain. You can already see foreshadowing of the gospel here, can't you? People being oppressed by the weight of sin and having somebody step in to ease it. The problem is here, that blessing is missing. And so the suffering that's described here is best understood as the kind that's very personal and isolating. And this is where the illusion of security already begins to crack this early in this lesson, because a lot of people believe if you build the right life or you gain enough influence or you have enough of a position, then you can avoid this kind of vulnerability. That's your blank there, avoid this kind of vulnerability. But the teacher is here to remind us that life under the sun, remember there's life beyond the sun, but right now we're trapped here under the sun. It doesn't always work that way. There are situations where power wins, where justice is delayed, and where people don't feel seen. So in his response, he says the dead are better off than the living, and those that are not yet born are better off than both. And I want you to understand, we talked about this a little bit last week, this is a lament. This is a poetic and expressive statement that he's saying. He doesn't literally think it's better to be dead than to be alive. It's not a statement of hopelessness. It's just an honest expression of how heavy the broken world feels. And surely we've all felt that at some point, hearing about some scenario or watching somebody we love go through something where we just feel hopeless. And what I really appreciate about this chapter is the teacher refuses to soften the reality of that. But then he says most people, it's almost like startling how he switches. He says most people are motivated to success because they envy their neighbors. What he's saying is it's probably better off to be dead, but even if you're alive, you're really just jealous. The word translated as envy is kina. It can also mean jealousy, or it can mean rivalry. Rivalry. It's describing the kind of motivation that is driven by comparison. So that's where another layer of insecurity gets exposed, even when people are not being oppressed. And even though there is oppression in this country, I mean, we are very blessed and very fortunate here. So even if we're not oppressed, we're triggered by something internal, which is the need to keep up. Kind of the modern saying for this is keeping up with those Joneses. They got everything, don't they? The pressure is to have what somebody else has. We've gotten into a culture where when we look at what somebody else has, we start to feel like maybe our life will be a little bit better if we do have it. And so the pressure to have what somebody else has becomes more what drives us than success itself. And the problem is there's no end game. There's no winning when that's what success looks like, to just have what somebody else has, because once you do, you're going to see something else that somebody else has. So the teacher, to really drive this home, uses a really cool extreme illustration. He talks about one person who folds their hands like this. This is what it means, a little folding of the hands. He does nothing. I did this earlier. I went home from work before I came back here, and I laid on my bed and I did a little folding of the hands. I was doing nothing. So he's saying one person folds their hands and does nothing, drifting into ruin. The other one fills both hands with work, constantly struggling, chasing, never at rest. And you would think that one option or the other one would work. But he's saying neither one leads to peace. If both your hands are constantly busy doing work, it's not going to lead to peace. You're striving, you're comparing, you're trying to achieve something. And if you do nothing, you just freeze and you don't do anything, you're accomplishing nothing as well. So that's why he offers this really simple but powerful alternative. He said it is better to have one handful with quietness than two handfuls with hard work and chasing the wind. The word translated as quietness, because what's a handful of quietness? So that word is nachat, and it speaks of rest or calm or a settled spirit. A settled spirit. There's not a spot for this, but if you want to write another word that would fit there, it's contentment. If you have one handful with contentment, basically whatever the Lord's given you, you hold on to that and you're content with it. Your other hand is open, you're ready to receive whatever he's got for you next. And so that means that you're not driven by fear or comparison or this endless working, regardless of how much you have. A couple personal insight questions for you there, and then we'll move on to the next 5 verses. 7 through 12 is the myth of independence. The myth of independence. But you've probably heard this in a wedding before. He says, I observed yet another example of something meaningless under the sun. This is the case of a man who is all alone, without a child or a brother, yet who works hard to gain as much wealth as he can, but then he asks himself, who am I working for? He's never had that moment before. Why am I giving up so much pleasure now? It's all so meaningless and depressing. And here it is. 2 people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. Likewise, 2 people lying close together can keep each other warm. But how can one be warm alone? And a person standing alone can be attacked and defeated. But 2 can stand back to back and conquer. 3 are even better, for a triple braided cord is not easily broken. Now, the teacher here is turning from oppression and comparison to something that is probably just as revealing to the human condition. He talks about a man who is completely alone, but still completely driven. When I met my wife, I had 5 jobs. It was gross, but I didn't want to be alone with my thoughts. I wanted to be busy, and I wanted to be so busy that when I wasn't busy, I was asleep. It's what you call a coping mechanism. It's not healthy. And here it says no family, no close relationships, no one to share life with, and still he works endlessly. So when he says, who am I working for? That feels a little bit different than anything else that came before that he wrote. This is not somebody who's been forced into hardship. This is somebody who made his own plans, his own decisions, set up his own work schedule, and all of a sudden had this moment of clarity where he goes, what am I doing? Someone who chose a path that looked good, but it ended up being empty. And the word that's translated as alone comes from the word echad, which just means one. The number 1. It just means one. It's someone more than a number. It just implies isolation. And isolation seems like it's came up a few times on Sundays here. But this is somebody who has found themselves isolated. Isolated is more than just alone. I hate that it even uses the word alone now that I know this, because to say that he ends up isolated carries a different meaning than he ended up alone, doesn't it? Isolated means not only are you not around people, you feel like you can't get a path to people that's meaningful. And so this is a life that's been reduced down to just self without anybody to share joy or burdens with. And so what makes this so scary and relatable is how easy it is to drift into this without realizing it. The teacher's not describing some weirdo here. He's describing a pattern that many people have fallen into. And don't we teach this? Work hard, stay focused, hustle. Somewhere along the way, relationships get pushed to the side. Relationships get pushed to the side. For people to get stuck on this path, at first it can feel like strength because independence gets celebrated. Being self-sufficient, not needing anyone, and handling everything on your own, it can look like success, but this scripture right here exposes the cost. He says, why am I giving up so much pleasure now? I mean, I don't have a spot for you on this, but that word pleasure, it connects back to the idea of enjoyment, which we've discussed in Ecclesiastes. It means that this man has built something, but in the process, he's lost the very thing that gave building something meaning. If you ever saw the Lego movie, you kind of get a lesson in that as Will Ferrell's, he's keeping all the Legos in pristine condition and he doesn't like his kids to play with it. But they're Legos, so. When he says, why am I giving up so much pleasure now? It's a moment of realization. And then we get to the spot that we hear in a lot of weddings. 2 people are better off than one. It's one of the clearest statements in all of Ecclesiastes. It means pretty much what it says. After describing isolation and what it is to have nobody to share anything with, that's the context for when he finally says, but two are better, because then you can share. If you have good news, you've got somebody to call, somebody to share it with. If you have bad news, you have somebody to commiserate with. If you've got something going on, if you got to rob a store, you've got somebody to drive the car or whatever. Whatever. What he's basically saying here is connection is part of what is wired into us with creation. And if it's wired into us, I want you to hear me on this. Connection with other people is not optional. It's a necessity for a Christian, for a believer. You're made in the image of God. People are not designed to carry life alone. You don't have to be an extrovert, but you got to have someone. So he gives some really practical pictures to it. If one falls, the other one can help him up. If the night is cold, they can keep each other warm. And if there's danger, they can stand together. These are everyday realities that he uses to drive it home. So that phrase, help each other succeed, comes from the Hebrew word tov. And we talked about that not long ago. It means good or beneficial, it can be beneficial or life-giving. Just like mazel tov, it's good. But then he adds one final image. And he says a triple braided cord is not easily broken. Now, we look backwards from the New Testament era that we live in now, and we can see that God is often that third strand who holds us together when we're talking about relationships. But the word for cord there is chaval, and it means something that is woven together for strength. For strength. Why would you weave, 3 cords together? Because it can hold more. And it's crazy. You would think that 2 ropes that are woven together hold twice as much. It's not the case. It's much more than twice as much. And 3, it's exponentially more. So it's not just 3 times as much as before. Strength gets multiplied when it's woven together, and that's the image that the teacher's trying to get across here. So we have to recognize that independence, while it can look strong on the outside, often leads to weakness on the inside. We were not created to carry everything alone. We were created to be woven together with other people so that we can carry things at a much more manageable pace. Strength is not found in avoiding dependence. It's found in placing it in the right place. I've heard it said before that codependence is bad. I agree. Fierce independence can be bad. There's a word that's not used a lot. It's called interdependent. It's where you choose to depend on each other and you rely on each other for the greater good. All right, 3 verses now. I'm really enjoying this because we're doing like 6 verses, 5 verses, 3 verses. We're going to do like a chapter and a half next. It's not a joke. All right, 3 verses. This is the illusion of status. The teacher says, it's better to be a poor but wise youth than an old and foolish king who refuses all advice. Such a youth could rise from poverty and succeed. He might even become king, though he has been in prison. But then everyone rushes to the side of yet another youth who replaces him. Endless crowds stand around him, but then another generation grows up and rejects him too. So it is all meaningless, like chasing the wind. Awesome, politics. All right, so everyone came here to talk about politics at a Bible study. The teacher is telling kind of a small tale here. It's almost like you watch a story unfold and fast forward here, but he talks about a poor young man who comes up through wisdom. He's also got a king who's once established and powerful who becomes resistant and foolish, and then the roles reverse. The king is now ousted, and this person who even started in prison but gained wisdom and came up now has a following. But once he rises to power, now there's a new younger person that comes up and everybody gets excited about this person. So he's saying, what's the point? Someone's going to replace you at some point. And that is the way that life does go. So at first, the story sounds hopeful because it sounds like wisdom can elevate someone. Circumstances can change, but then as time goes on, he doesn't stop at the rise. He keeps watching and sees how other people choose another generation that grows up and rejects the previous one. So your first blank there, he says the same pattern repeats. It's the same pattern. So we're talking about security. If you've got the security or the support of the masses, or everybody really appreciates what you do, it may feel good, but it is also not something to lean your weight on. The crowd that once gathered moves on, and the support that felt solid starts to shift. The phrase that's translated as endless crowds comes from the Hebrew word hamon. It refers to a multitude or a large noisy gathering. Noisy gathering. And it's important that you know that, because when you get a lot of people together, It is noisy. In specific, when I say a noisy gathering, I want you to think of the kind of crowd that feels powerful simply because of its size and its energy. Think of a crowd at a sporting event or at a political rally. They are all there for the same thing and for the same purposes, for the most part. And so it carries this idea of excitement and momentum. A few weeks ago, when my family and we went to see wrestling, you know who else was there? People who like wrestling. It felt different than watching it in the living room on the TV because you're around a bunch of people that are excited, so you build and you feed off of this excitement. That's the kind of gathering that he's talking about, where everybody would be excited about something. Because that idea of excitement and momentum is also something that can feel overwhelming. And the teacher's showing us how quickly even that kind of attention can shift. What feels strong in one moment because it's loud and grabs your attention doesn't mean that it's stable. Public support can rise quickly, but it can also just as quickly move on. And a lot of people look to recognition as a form of security. Most people here, as far as I'm aware, are not running for a public office right now, right? And that's fine. You're probably going to be at more peace if you don't. But most people at some point in their life are looking for recognition as a form of security. Being known or respected or being in a position of influence can feel like something that gives you stability. But the teacher exposes even that can fall away because people can change. And the deeper issue here is not the position of influence itself. If you live a life filled with wisdom, you're going to gain it. It's what you expect it to provide for you. So when status becomes the place that you look to for your meaning, just like everything else, it's going to disappoint you because it too was never meant to carry that kind of weight. So the teacher is really just trying to expose the limits of leadership or influence. Influence. You can rise, you can lead, you can be surrounded by people, and still find that it doesn't last the way that you hoped that it would. In the New Testament, you actually see that even leadership itself is a spiritual gift designed to serve other people, not yourself. Every spiritual gift is designed for somebody other than you. And so this just means we have to learn to see recognition for what it is. It could be a platform or a responsibility or even a blessing, but it can never be a foundation, amen? It can't secure our identity, and it can't guarantee lasting meaning. All right, now we're going to cover Ecclesiastes chapter 5 through the first 9 verses of chapter 6. And I said in the email, read it in advance, because I'm not going to read you a chapter and a half at a time now. But this is called the false promise of more. And this sort of encapsulates a lot of what we were talking about with all of the previous subjects, that there's more ahead, more will make you fulfilled. Nobody likes to admit it, but when you are single, you start to feel like if I could just get married, I'd feel fulfilled. I know there's a lot of couples in here I love. Have you ever arrived at marriage and found, wow, this is hard? It is. And it's worth it. It's worth the struggle. But it is hard. And sometimes we feel like, man, if we have kids will make it easier. They do not make it easier. You know that 3-stranded cord we were talking about? They love to just pick at it and watch it unravel. Kids make things harder because you have more responsibility. So here he's talking about approaching God with care, the futility of wealth, and a lot of other things. Let's go ahead and jump into this. He's got several observations together, and we can't read all of it word for word because instead of moving through a straight line, if you read this, then you know that this is where he begins circling the same idea from different angles. It's the same idea for this whole chapter and a half, but from different angles. And the repetition is not accidental. He wasn't forgetting where he started and starting over again. This is a very classic teaching method where repetition helps drive something home. And the theme underneath all of it is simple but challenging. It's this: more, I'll put that in quotation marks, whatever it is more of, will never make you feel secure. And to prove this, he actually starts in an unexpected place. He starts with worship. He starts with worship. How many of y'all didn't know you were coming here to hear that you can have too much worship? I'm just kidding. But this is what he says. The teacher speaks about entering the house of God. He's not just giving an instruction, he's warning about being careless with words because it points to something deeper. It's possible to be active around God without being attentive to him. And that is something we still struggle with to this day. I guarantee you there were people that came here for Resurrection Sunday, praised Jesus, had a great time, didn't talk to God the rest of the day. The word translated, rash, comes from the Hebrew word bahal. It means to hurry or to act impulsively or to speak without thought. To speak without thought. So the teacher here is exposing a kind of spiritual life that is busy and expressive or even emotional, but not something that comes from a place of reverence for God. And this is where the phrase fear God becomes important again, but it has brand new weight to it now. Because the word yareh, which we've talked about in a previous lesson, it talks about awe or of recognizing the distance between who God is and who we are. Yeah, God lives inside of you, but remember, this is Ecclesiastes, this is Old Testament, they didn't have the same theology. We know that God and the Holy Spirit lives inside of us. We know that he's never really that far from us, but when you think about how holy he is and how earthly we are, there's quite a bit of distance, isn't there? It's that kind of awareness that slows us down and reminds us that God is not someone that we manage. He is somebody that we should approach with humility. So from here, the teacher then shifts to money, still circling the same idea. He says, those who love money will never have enough. And the word that's translated love comes from the Hebrew word ahav. It means affection or attachment. It's not about having money, it means being attached to your money. It's about where the heart leans. All of us have at least one thing that tends to trigger our anxiety the fastest, and it may be a relational problem, it may be money, it may be problems at work, whatever it is, it's something that you have wrapped part of your identity in. It's neither here nor there, we all have something, but for those that love money, this is the trap for them. And the teacher's clear that when the heart leans towards more, it never arrives at enough. If you're focused on more, you're not focused on enough, right? So he describes what happens next. As wealth increases, so do the demands around it. More responsibility, more consumption, more pressure. And the promise is stability, but the result feels more like stress. So think about how deep it is when he says, paraphrased, the one who works hard can sleep, while the one who has much struggles to rest. That's part of what is in this chapter. I'm going to say that again. Listen to this again. The one who works hard can sleep, while the one who has much struggles to rest. Because when you work hard, you've got some enjoyment in the fact that you've contributed. But when you've got a lot, you're worried about losing it. So as the teacher then moves from chapter 5 into chapter 6, which we just covered the first 9 verses in this, he's still circling the same truth. I don't know why we put the number 6 there and started the chapter there, but we did. But now he's doing it from another angle, where he's saying a person can have everything. They can have wealth and honor and opportunity and still lack the ability to enjoy it. And that word enjoy becomes incredibly important because it connects to the Hebrew word ra'ah, which means to see. Not a physical sight. This carries the idea of being able to perceive or recognize what is good. Most people have good things in their life, and many of them can't perceive that they are there. Most people have good relationships or good blessings or good situations, but they can't see it because they're focused on an area where they need more. And this is what the teacher is trying to get across. Unfortunately, the ability to perceive or recognize this is not guaranteed. And this is where the repetition begins to become more evident and more, you can see why he did it. Because the teacher's not just repeating a thought, he's trying to show that all of these areas expose a pattern in the human heart. People keep reaching for more, and he describes it as a kind of hunger that keeps returning. I mean, we eat several times a day, but could you imagine if you got hungry 15 minutes after every meal? It would be exhausting to have to deal with that. Some of you are like, get off my back, I like Reese's cups. That's a different thing. The idea that people are never satisfied comes from the Hebrew word maleh, and it means to be filled or full, very simple. In other words, you do not feel spiritually satiated. You do not feel full. You do not feel like you've had enough. The teacher is trying to show us the disconnect here. A life can be full from the outside and still feel empty on the inside. And so the appetite keeps reaching, even when it feels like you should be satisfied. By the way, normally if you find yourself in this place, you also start to heap shame on top of yourself because you tell yourself such helpful things as, other people have it worse. I should be grateful. Why don't I appreciate this more? Well, because you got sin, and sinful people do this. So stop it, be less sinful. That's what we're all trying to do. All right, I said the pastoral part was at the beginning. So he brings it back to something simple, but not easy. I mean, that's not the same thing. Simple and easy are two different things. He basically says, enjoy what you have rather than desiring what you don't have. Enjoy the relationship you have rather than desiring a relationship you don't have. Enjoy the home that you have rather than wishing you had a different home. Enjoy the car you drive instead of the car you wish you had. Learn to enjoy what you have. It doesn't mean you'll never have more, but when you can appreciate what's right here, you'll also appreciate what is to come as well. This is not a call to stop working or to stop growing. It's just a call to stop expecting more to do what only God can do. So your last two blanks. The issue is not effort, it's expectation. The issue is not effort, it's expectation. You've been around me, I always talk about this. The number one relationship killer is unmet expectations. A lot of times there's distance with God because of those unmet expectations. All right, last three verses. Ecclesiastes 6, 10 through 12, and this is called the limits of knowing. And I will read this to you. It says, everything has already been decided. It was known long ago what each person would be. So there's no use arguing with God about your destiny. This will mess with your theology a little bit. The more words you speak, the less they mean. So what good are they? In the few days of our meaningless lives, who knows how our days can be best spent? Our lives are like a shadow. Who can tell what will happen on this earth after we're gone? So when he speaks to destiny here, I do want to make this clear. It is not that God has decided everything you're going to do and accomplish and you have no choice. You have free will. Out of all of God's creation, you are the only thing that has the ability to tell him no. But God sits outside of time. He knows who you will be. He knows where you will end up. He knows what you will do. It is all pre-written for him because he is not bound by time. He's not, I want to make sure you understand me by him being eternal. He's not just at the end of the game. He's not just where he can DVR and rewind it and see what you're going to do. He's everywhere. He is before there was time. He is when time ends, and he's right here. He's just as present with us in this room as he is with Moses at the burning bush right now, okay? So for him, he already knows everything. You have free will. Make the most of it, okay? The teacher closes this section by bringing everything down to a place that's pretty honest, and if you let it, it humbles you. He's talked about oppression and isolation, and he's talked about status and wealth and the endless pursuit of more, and now he turns to what is underneath all of it, which is our limited ability to truly understand life. To understand life. Most of us, if somebody said, how are you doing? We wouldn't look at them and say, I'm pretty great, I understand life. No, most of us would be like, just out here trusting God. So he starts by reminding us that life is not as random as we sometimes like to imagine. There is a sense that things are already established. That word that's translated as determined comes from the Hebrew word kara, which can mean to call or to name or to appoint. So when it says that everything's already been determined, it's already been called, it's been named, it's been appointed. It has the whole idea that things are not random. This is a bit of a throwback to the seasons he discussed in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. There's order, there's intention, and there's structure to life, even if we don't understand it. But that idea immediately puts us in a position of limitation. Limitation. I want you to understand that this is one of the concepts in your faith life that will give you more freedom than almost anything else. And it sounds like it wouldn't, but you are limited. Okay, now listen, when you first hear this, it may feel like, again, it comes against that control issue. When you understand that you're limited and you were created to be limited in that way, you do not have to stress yourself out with things that are above your pay grade, so to speak. Those are God issues. These ones are mine. So I only have to deal with this. I'm not expected to deal with all of that. Take the weight of the world off your shoulders. We're not the ones that define everything. We're not the ones that are setting every outcome. There are realities about life that exist outside of our control, and that should give you relief. If it doesn't tonight, keep praying for it. The teacher says this. He says, no one can contend with someone who is stronger. And that word translated contend comes from the Hebrew word din, which means to strive or argue or dispute. Dispute. This is the picture of someone trying to push back. He's trying to paint this picture. Someone trying to argue their case with God or gain control over something that's greater than themselves. Good luck, because the teacher is clear that there's a limit to that. There are just parts of life that we can't fully explain or predict. And the more that we try to force understanding in places where it doesn't exist, the more frustrated we become. So this is something that Christians are guilty of to this day. When they try to explain why, quote unquote, everything happens for a reason, which already has its problems. I don't have time to go down that rabbit hole. But when they try to name what the reason is, it's unfulfilling when believers do this because it's either untrue or only partially true. Let me give you an example. When somebody's going through a hard time and you go up to them and you say, I think this happened so that you could learn, fill in the blank. I mean, we hate this because we've received it and we've given it out. We've all done this, right? But it's hard because we're trying to give a very quick, simple answer to somebody's deep internal wound, and you're not designed to handle that. Let God do the healing. You don't have to solve it. You're not God's little Sherlock, okay? You are to sit with somebody and love them, rejoice when they rejoice, to mourn when they mourn. That's the job, not to solve, right? So he says, who can tell what is good for a person in this life? Well, you can give your advice. We talked about that on a Sunday a couple weeks ago, but you don't know. And who can tell what will happen after we're gone? Well, there is one answer. These are not questions that are meant to be answered quickly. They're meant to slow us down and put us in a place where we're thinking and a place of humility. A place of humility. It's supposed to remind us that even our best understanding has limits. But that's not a flaw. That's part of how you're designed. You're made to have limits. It's a reality. And so renewing our minds in this study means to live with that reality without becoming anxious or overwhelmed by it. Yesterday, I don't know when you're watching this recording, if you watch this later, yesterday, I believed that there was an 8 p.m. deadline that something devastating was going to happen in the world, and then it changed, and maybe it's changed again. It's like flip-flop more than Jan on The Office. That's a limited reference, but what I'm saying is this. I don't know the way that that situation is going to go. And it's not that it doesn't matter, and it's not that it doesn't get my prayers, but I have to let God be God, and I have to worry about what is in my one hand where I'm receiving from him today, amen? All right, we're going to break into group discussion. If you're on the live stream, we're going ahead and cut the live stream, and then we'll have acoustic worship at the end of the night. And for those that are here, if you missed a blank or something. 3 of them?